Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in ADGM's Webcast 2020 series. I'm Executive Director of Business Development with Abu Dhabi Global Market. Welcome to everybody that's joining us today via our website, via LinkedIn Live, via YouTube, and via Twitter. We'd love to have you joining us on these platforms throughout this series, and really welcome the questions that you give us that help make these sessions as interactive as we possibly can. Please feel free to submit your questions. For any that we don't get to during this session, then I know my panelists will be delighted to come back to some of those subsequently. We've had a very vibrant series of webcasts throughout this series, focusing from employment law and in-country value, looking at how businesses prepare for the post-COVID world. We've looked at debt restructuring, we've looked at exports, we've looked at survival of business, at cash flows, at the investment environment supported by the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, the way supply chains are being reshaped as a result of this current crisis, business continuity, the impact on the investment world, and specific sessions looking at things like Indian and regional family offices. Today, we turn our attention. I know this is a subject close to many people's hearts and is seeing a real catalyst for the growth of the small and medium-sized enterprises and the innovation ecosystem here in Abu Dhabi. It's something that in Abu Dhabi Global Market we've been particularly keen to support. We introduced the first venture capital regime in this region, and we've been close partners with the likes of Plug and Play, of Hub 71 and other parties within Abu Dhabi, this agenda forward. We also partner with a number of educational institutions who are looking at helping their participants to commercialize their intellectual capital and bring new ventures to market. We'll cover a wide range of themes today, and I'm going to pause there and ask my panelists to introduce themselves. I have a distinguished panel today, led by Mahmoud Adi, founding partner of Sharuk Partners, Jaideep Mehta, CEO of Mosaic Digital, Sunil Gakale, the partner in Venture Souk, and Norsway, GP of Global Ventures. To start that off, Mahmoud, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting us. My name is Mahmoud Adi. I'm a founding member of VC Partners. Shuruk VC Partners is probably one of the first VCs to benefit from what you see, the VC regime out of ADGM. We are an early stage focused firm, seed to Series A, with geographical focus across the MENA region. We like to come early in companies and lead our rounds. Have over the past few years, where I'm excited to share with everyone, we have seen tremendous growth in entrepreneurs and capital in the ecosystem, and I will leave some of those discussion topics for later. But we have those exciting movement, and there is sectorial development as well as in the region, which we have been super excited about. Without further ado, let me hand it over to my co-panelist, Jaideep Mehta, the CEO of VC Circle.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world. A pleasure to be here, to be part of this wonderful panel. And today I'll be sharing experiences, insights, and observations with respect to the Indian alternate investment ecosystem and the lessons that we can all draw from there. While in the short term it's been battered by the ongoing COVID crisis, I guess, like everywhere else in the world, but there have been some interesting and indeed some wave-creating deals, most notably in the Reliance Jio platforms, where a number of prestigious investors have piled in, and they've raised more than $20 billion now. But aside from that as well, one of the other interesting things that we've seen in the last 6 months, and indeed part of a longer term trend, is the continued growth in pre-seed, angel, and early stage deals in India, even in H1 2020. So that I think is probably the best vote of confidence that investors can have, despite all the dislocations with the COVID crisis. The other notable thing is that almost 50% of the $16 billion odd investment flow in the country in H1 has been actually $100 million plus deals, which in the Indian context are classified as very large deals, which again tells us that the ecosystem is actually betting on India with a degree of confidence. And I sign off my introduction by sharing that actually the Indian stock exchanges seem to believe that we will also be weathering the storm and doing really well. And I've actually gained 40 percentage points since the lows of February and March when the COVID crisis first hit. So across public markets and private investment ecosystems, there is a note of caution, but equally there is a note of optimism. And there's much to talk about. So I'll hand over now to Sunil from VentureSouk and to participating in the Q&A session later.
I'm Sunil Gokhale, one of the founding partners of VentureSouk. VentureSouk is an early firm based here in the UAE. We've got a global portfolio, having made investments in places like the United States, India, Southeast Asia, the MENA region, of course, Africa, and a few other places in between. In terms of sector, over the years, we've generally been opportunistic, but recently have started to really focus our energies on fintech, enterprise SaaS, and a few other notable sectors. Handing it over now to my co-panelist, Noor Swade.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to be Noor Swade, General Partner at Global Ventures. We are a UAE-based venture capital firm investing in Series A and B companies across the Middle East and Africa. Historically, we've focused more on enterprise B2B. We focus with companies that are based in the region, scaling globally. Recently, we've been very excited about digital health and a few other sectors that are growing a lot during this crisis, and we believe that trend will continue. With that overview, I would love to hand it over and open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Noor, and thank you, everybody, for those introductions. Can I just, as we get going in this session, just remind the participants that are on the various different media that now is a great time to start submitting questions through. I will pick those up and make sure they get directed appropriately to my panelists for today. Noor, I'd like to start with you, if we could, please. We talked a little bit about the development of the ecosystem for venture capital here in the Middle East. And I know that you've been absolutely instrumental in the development of the Middle East Venture Capital Association. Perhaps you can give us a little bit of that, let us know who the members are and what you're looking to achieve out of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. So the Middle East Venture Capital Association, what we refer to as MEVCA, is an initiative that was launched about 2 years ago. 20 of the VCs around the region to start off as a board. And so they're on the website, which is mevca.me. So it's from BNY Ventures to Faith Capital, Beko, Iliad, Silicon Valley, Saudi Telecom Ventures, and on and on. We had WAMDA, Algebra, Valia. So really, try to bring together one or two VCs from each country across the region, or more if there were more, and to bring them under one umbrella. And the purpose of that was similar to in the US how we have the National Venture Capital Association. In Britain, we have the British Venture Capital Association. There's a European one, the Latin one. I can keep going. Hong Kong, you get the drift. And what these associations really allow for is the VCs to communicate, collaborate, somewhat of a base for term sheets so that when we come to follow-ons for seed rounds, we as a Series A investor know what to expect, and vice versa for the Series B investor. So once you can establish a regional best practice, it becomes a lot easier for founders to pursue follow-on capital in acceptable amounts of time. So that is part of why it was established, to encourage collaboration and so on. Recently, and today being the first day, we've launched a mentorship platform which will go live this week. We have almost 1,000 hours of contributed mentorship from VCs and ADGM, as well as other institutions around the region that really want to work closely with founders to understand their issues and to help them at earlier stages. So we're very fortunate, Global Ventures is in there, Silicon Valley is in there, Faith Capital is in there. So we have a lot of the VCs around Algebra. So as you look to expand into Saudi, Riyadh Ventures has donated a lot of hours to founders. So you can actually just from the platform engage hours of mentorship, and then from there, that will enable you to find easier, better, faster ways that are more cost-effective to enter new markets. So really, it's a platform for founders, VCs, to collaborate, to learn, and to advance the ecosystem.
Thank you. Excuse me, sorry, struggling with my voice today. Sunil, I know that before we get Noor was giving you a little bit of a nudge and a little bit of a bully to get some of your hours contributed to this as well. So tell me how you see the developments of the MEVCA.
Yeah, I think further to what Noor was saying, you've seen similar associations in more developed ecosystems emerge and really push and investors to make more consistent their practices and really regulate behavior so that not just investors but founders also know what to expect in terms of what's market for seed. You've seen the emergence of not organizations like the Y Combinator Safe or the 500 Startup convertible note, which has really helped reviewers has really helped in terms of making more efficient discussions between investors and founders at an early stage, and allowing those two parties to essentially focus on the commercials and not really get into legal negotiations early on. Later on, and kind of looking through that process. Similar organizations in other markets have had that impact when it comes to regulating later stage rounds of financing, how follow-ons will be conducted, and how parties will generally behave towards one another to keep everything efficient between the parties. So I think it's great. It's worked in other markets very well, and we have no doubt it'll work here as well.
Absolutely agree. You mentioned that you're one of the first to take advantage of the ADGM venture capital environment. I guess it's important for you development of a community of venture capital players as well. How do you see that collaboration working as you go forward?
Absolutely, Steve. So if you think about the VC ecosystem, right? We keep saying ecosystem, and by ecosystem means there is multiple players that are coming together. There is the regulator, capital providers, the entrepreneurs, right? Customers, etc. And I think at the end of the day, if we look at where we stand in the MENA region, right? It's kind of growing and developing rapidly. But we're still at the beginning, and laying those foundation where and MEVCA has been instrumental is to kind of provide that layer of infrastructure where there is a good understanding in the market of what should I expect as an early stage investor, right? That my Series A investor or Series B investor would be looking for in terms of terms, right? At the end of the day, I'm sort of handing over my baby to the family to take care of that baby, right? And if the rule of the game is not quite aligned with how I'm thinking about my investment, it will be problematic, right? And that will shaken the trust of the ultimately the larger pool of capital, the LPs, into the ecosystem, right? So I think at the end of the day, working together and collaborating and establishing some basis for how we're going to collaborate together as players is essential. And to Sunil's and Noor's point, we have seen that in other developed markets, and it did help significantly. It does actually, it increases the efficiency of what we do, right? If there is a standard term sheet, right, I would be a lot more efficient in writing the term sheet to my company rather than spending 2 weeks negotiating a term sheet, right? So we are all in for bringing the kind of the market players together and supporting those initiatives.
And JD, what can we learn from India in this respect?
I'd make a couple of points. I think firstly, some of your colleagues, the ADGM delegation had joined Limited Partner Summit earlier in the year. Probably one of the last physical conferences in the country, actually, before this terrible virus took control of all our lives. But we had, I think, about 15 or 16 people who came in as part of the delegation. And there was a lot of enthusiasm in India with respect to the potential for collaboration and the diversification opportunity that is offered by funds taking a view of investing across the Middle East and India. To remarkably similar markets in behavior, but very different from a fundamentals perspective and growth potential perspective in some ways as well. I think specifically from an association perspective, one of the learnings that I would like to share with you, I've been personally involved through a couple of entities in actually helping government to catch up from a policy perspective with the disruptions that the tech sector keeps chucking at the laws of practically everything. I mean, one of the most famous examples was how many countries and how many cities Uber was illegal in when they first launched, and regulation had to catch up. So I would urge you to look at, as this association evolves, to look at having an active dialogue with the relevant policy institutions. Of course, ADGM itself houses a regulator, but also with the broader ministries and the government, to evolve a policy framework. It'll never get ahead of the tech sector disruptions. That's never going to happen. But if they can be kind of 10 or 20% behind and not 50% behind, that's mostly good enough there, right? So that's one point I'd just like to add. I don't want to repeat. I think there's been some great points made. But that was one thing which I thought I'll add. The second area which I think the Middle East as a region and the UAE is particularly well suited to is to really throw the spotlight on the deep pools of family office capital, which can act as LPs within the region, but also again diversifying. We're seeing, especially the newer funds which have been launched in India, in some cases as much as 50-60% of the funds raised have actually come from local Indian family offices, but also from a number of family offices. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and till recently China. Though of course, with the new political climate between India and China, I guess that's going to go down to zero. So those are the 2 points I thought I'll make to begin with, and happy to kind of add as we go along here.
Yeah, thank you. Some really good points across the board there. You talked about family offices, and we see the rise of angel as well as venture funding as well, and I think that's critically important. For my sort of second theme, what I'd like to do is more of a market perspective, and we've had a question from Mohammed Safi on LinkedIn about the panel's perspective on the outlook for venture capital investments in the light of the new normal post-pandemic. We've talked about a couple of themes that are coming through, or sector investment opportunities. Sunil, you talked about some of the things that you're seeing from a sectoral perspective. What's your take on the market as we see it now? What are the key sectors that we're seeing innovation in that venture capital investors can take advantage of?
Sure. No, good question. I think it's important to look at what's happened post-COVID from a sector perspective. So if you start with stage, all indications are that the seed stage financing is still very, very hot globally. There's no shortage of capital chasing deals still in the U.S. and developed ecosystems like India. India is our second biggest geo in terms of portfolio companies, and there's no shortage of early stage deals. And also, we are still seeing quite a bit of capital going into very later stage deals because they're seen as more sure bet, particularly with a bit more of a capital moat. We're seeing less financing happening at the Series B, Series C stage during this kind of COVID time, and we'll see how that progresses post COVID. From a sector standpoint, you're seeing, unsurprisingly, sectors like fintech, future of work, e-commerce, and things that are, or subsectors that are tangential to those sectors, do very well. Fintech financing, particularly at the early stages, is not really in H1 globally for 2020 is not far behind where it was in half one 2019, and there's a lot more money going into earlier stage deals in fintech. Future of work, of course, software platforms that enable remote working, distributed teams is obviously taken off globally, with, of course, Zoom carrying the torch, and then, a number of different platforms developing for local markets. E-commerce, of course, penetration rates have gone way up, and so you're seeing startups that cater or are tangential to that, or offer infrastructure around e-commerce. You look at Shopify, of course, it's a public company, but how it's performed over the last year has been phenomenal. It's essentially one of the best performing companies in the world, and so you're seeing that trickle down into early stage private companies as well. And that's not when given how our work lives have changed over the last 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, that's your point on stages, I think, is really well made. We're seeing a continued interest, probably stronger interest than we've ever seen before, in the startup licenses that we issue as ADGM. We introduced a low-cost startup particularly focused on tech firms, and it's great to see the innovation that's coming through there, which I guess gives a flow of opportunity for investors. Noor, you talked about health side of things in your introduction. Is that where you're focused at the moment, or do you see investment opportunities across the board?
We see across the board, as Sunil mentioned. I mean, digital health is one of the areas that we're very excited about. We think that the region is so far behind in terms of healthcare access and healthcare inclusion in general at large. So, for example, we have 1.2 doctors per 1,000 people, whereas Europe and the US and OECD markets have 4 doctors per 1,000 people. So where we're seeing that play out in a way that we saw financial inclusion play out over the last 10 years, which was, the question then was, how do you bank the unbanked without building banks? Now the question is, how do you provide healthcare access without building hospitals? And a large part of that solution is digital health. So we're very excited about that. We're also excited about future of work. We made a recent investment in a company called Ogrum, which focuses on that. We're excited about fintech and, across the board, agri-tech, but again, perhaps the software that vertical farms use rather than the vertical farms that, people like Mahmoud are involved with themselves. So it's, future of work, robotics. So I don't think the future of, for example, of an airport or a mall is going to be the same, because if you think about, contagion of diseases versus what's available, Roomba that existed 10 years ago can capture a lot of data on the type of bacteria being caught in different parts of the infected and accurate that cleaning would be. So if this becomes something consistent over the next 20 years or 10 years, I think that there will be a lot of robotics development and commercialization of robotic technology that already exists. So really across the board, I'll take 10 more seconds and say that I feel for the Series A companies, so those companies that raised seed rounds last year that have had a very difficult last 5 months are the ones struggling, because they haven't managed to meet most of their KPIs that they were expecting to meet to raise a proper Series A. Whereas I think the seed companies are in a great position now to tackle a growing market with a lot of tailwind.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So timing is everything, I guess, in the markets, and it's been a tough time for a lot of opportunity for others as well. We see new market opportunities opening up, or acceleration of market opportunities that perhaps we would have taken a little longer to get to market. Jaideep, I think you had a point you wanted to make on this as well.
I think one of the silver linings from the COVID crisis has been the massive boom into some of the other points in the education space. At least in India, there has been a veritable boom in attending. And to my mind, just building on what Noor said, I think a great challenge for emerging countries which have a massive young population and absolutely horrendous legacy infrastructure. If we can use or pivot the education ecosystem to a digital on the back of this crisis, then I'll say some good would have come from it. I think the danger, of course, is that it has to also increase the digital divide, where the poorer folks who don't necessarily have the wherewithal to buy laptops or other devices to receive digital education, there is a danger they get further left behind. But my personal view is that if you take a limited view of subsidizing or indeed distributing free those kinds of devices to school-going children and so on, it's not a very difficult thing to manage. And many state governments in India in the past have done that. And that happens and creates the kids to actually receive digital education. And on the other side, folks like Noor and Sunil and Mahmood and their Indian counterparts are looking to invest in such companies. It can actually make a phenomenal generational difference in society. So going above and beyond the tremendous financial returns which can be gleaned, there is a huge societal impact as well here in fintech, which were the points made earlier. I just thought I'll leave that as a thought for the panel here.
Can I quickly add to that very quickly? So I agree with Jaideep, and I think, and I wrote to this effect a couple of days ago. I posted an article talks exactly about this, that talks about how crises effectively encourage people to create platforms. So education technology, like Jaideep was saying, historically the biggest bottleneck has been content. So companies struggle because there isn't enough content online. In the last 6 months, we've seen more content to be created online than probably history together. No one's done the data, but from where I sit and from what we're seeing. And just like the financial crisis, in the 12 months after that, you had Uber come in as a mobility platform that changed the world, especially emerging markets. And you had Airbnb come in as a logic platform. So I think in crises, people tend to build platforms, or platforms tend to emerge because of the creation of other things. So now education, content has been commoditized. If there's a platform that gets built that puts a very user-friendly journey with 3 clicks, like Uber or Airbnb, then you can really commoditize learning onto this platform and change the way that people learn, do well and do good at the same time. Similarly, with healthcare platforms will be created now because suddenly health tech is becoming ubiquitous, and so on and so forth. So these platforms really do change the world, and they are usually historically the result of different sorts of crises. I completely agree with Jaideep that the opportunity in education is amazing.
It's a great point. We've got some really interesting questions coming through from the audience. I'm going to perhaps combine a couple of them. Tim asked what would be our perspective on building a VC fund itself. Mahmood, perhaps as a founding partner of a VC fund, that's something that you want to take a lead on.
Sure. Building a VC fund is, of course, from the outside, is a lot of fun, right? You're managing third-party capital, and you're meeting one amazing entrepreneur. But the realities of it is a lot of hard work, right? At the end of the day, it's not about building the VC fund; it's to have a thesis that you are excited and you're passionate about, and you fundamentally believe that this thesis is going to play out, right? So similar to what your panelists have been alluding to, like on financial inclusion or healthcare inclusion, right? Or what have you, right? You got to have a thesis, right? That you believe is going to play out. And then you need to convince what we call them limited partners, the provider of capital, of your thesis and why you think this will play out. You need to have a knowledge of deals and how the VC industry works, right? Because what is quite unique about this sector, it is a multi-stage financing, right? And there is, by definition, when we say multi-stage, right, you are handing over the company to the next set of investors, and you are trusting that they can continue to be aligned somehow with your vision, right? Or they're going to bring in a vision that is more powerful and keep the company growing, right, and scaling, right? So you need to have some knowledge on how that works, right? And at the end of the day, you need to also have a good understanding of capital back to the investors, right? It is a cycle. It's not only one way direction, right? Now, to be able to do that, also you need to have access to deals, right, and proprietary deals. And I think your panelists probably will agree that what we have seen in today's market, that the good deals are mostly oversubscribed, right? So the power on the table today is somewhere in the middle, versus probably 5 years ago. We started in 2016, Shuruq, right? The power was a lot more on the VC side, the capital provider entrepreneurs, and today the entrepreneurs, they want to see how you're going to add value for them, right? And why you are the right investors for them, and how the values align, right? So there is that element, and typically the most entrepreneurs who have the most worthy ideas to back, they want to go to the top VCs, right? And it's it creates this circular part of course. Sequoia is one of the most successful firm, but also there is this kind of feedback loop, that because they have been early and they have been successful from the beginning, they get to see the best deals ever, and they get to sort of pick and choose, right? So I would love to hear your panelists' perspective, but I think we are at a stage where there is now some of the dynamics around. You need to sell yourself as a VC rather than only just give capital, right? And that's where an emergence of value-add services, which is well integrated in the US ecosystem, started to also emerge in our ecosystem, right? How are you going to help the company with hiring? How are you going to help companies with the scaling across the region? The Middle East Venture Capital Association, the effort that Noor talked about, where there are VCs across the region that can help companies scale, is quite important for entrepreneurs in our region, because what is each country is different, right? And none of the countries is big enough to build a multi-billion-dollar tech company. So you got to take a regional perspective. So once you have all those elements sort of thought through, and you got them in a place, of course you got to have a team. It's difficult to do all of that by yourself. I think you probably have the kind of first building block for a VC fund.
And I think that perspective of that balance of relationship between the investor and the investee is a really interesting one, and one that a lot of people don't really appreciate when they go into this market, that it's not just a matter of providing capital, it's about providing value above and beyond that capital. But I think it's a really great point. It links into some of the other questions that we've had around where we see the opportunity, particularly for Series A in the region, and what with opportunities being. My observation is, as you say, that there are some really fantastic innovations coming to market, and those are really in demand. There's also a lot of noise that's out there. How do you guys approach that? Do you sift the opportunities that are out there? Sunil, perhaps I can ask you to take a lead on that.
Sure. I think, as you know, and I think, you know, Mahmoud hit it right on the head in terms of building a VC firm. So definitely. But you know, I think when you talk about a lot of noise and picking and choosing between great founders in the region, and we're seeing, which is a good thing for the entire ecosystem, it's good for us as investors, and it's good for other founders and other potential partners with those companies. We're seeing a lot more activity. For us, it's really depending on, of course, the size of your firm and the mandate. I think it's really important to be thesis driven and really identify areas that you believe as a firm will experience huge amounts of growth in the coming 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and then look for, of course, in those particular subsectors. I think you're probably going to see a bit of a trend towards, which kind of sounds like when talking to the co-panelists here today, we all have certain areas or mentioned certain areas that we're more, and so I think, and you're seeing that a lot in the U.S. with some of the larger firms like the Andreessens and the Sequoias of the world now doing specialized firms, realizing that a more targeted approach makes more sense in the long run from an expertise standpoint and from a value creation standpoint. I think for us it's really identifying areas that we really like and we're super excited about, and then going and finding founders that can build great particular areas. But it's really, at the end of the day, it's about having a very wide funnel and just doing your work and looking for the best companies in each of those areas.
Thank you. I've got a question here that perhaps I can pass to you to start with, and then I'll take it to Jaydeep for his perspectives from India to see if we can learn things from that. And that's whether we see regional family offices adopting a venture builder model when engaging with startups in the region, or perhaps this is something that family offices have been doing even before the formal emergence of the venture builder term.
So I think family offices are very engaged in the ecosystem historically. It's not just about now, just in different ways. So sometimes it's some members of the family, sometimes it's that they set up a venture builder or a VC arm for the family office. There's two schools of thought, right? And I go from one to the other, so I fluctuate. One is that it's their involvement with the startups because they lend a huge amount of operational knowledge and how to scale companies. The other is that it hinders a startup's ability to scale and pivot quickly and scares other family offices that consider these ones competition. So you go between the two. I think that there's an increasing amount of family offices doing this. I also think that family offices invest in startups are very different to traditional VC terms. And so when we see term sheets that have some family offices in there from prior rounds, they look very different to term sheets that have VCs in there from prior rounds. So that's kind of where the ecosystem sits. That said, I think that the involvement and engagement of family offices in the VC ecosystem is paramount, especially in the region, because that's where large amounts of operational experience are held and where a tremendous amount of value can be added to the startups from these family offices if they engage in and let the startup founder continue to run the company as they see fit. Again, and this goes just back to very quickly, I'll say, as VCs, we invest in people, as Mahmoud mentioned and Sunil mentioned, and we back the founders in achieving their visions and pivoting. And I think that when other investors come in that are more backing an asset or a company or a certain idea or potential business, it's as an asset rather than a person or a founder. So it just has to be done with the right mindset, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense, yeah, and it builds on Mahmoud's point from before, I think, as well, where you were talking about the ability to contribute above and beyond the investment of capital. And I think families who really understand the region and understand how business gets done in the region can be fundamental in that growth objective. So, no, it makes complete sense. Jaydeep, from the Indian family perspective, have you seen the same sort of thing coming through?
I think we're a little bit back in the evolution process, and I'll explain what that means. So, when you look at the Indian family office idea, there's two distinct types of family offices. So there's the old large industrial families and their wealth management processes. And then there's the new wealth created primarily in the internet sector or the new age tech sector. And those entrepreneurs have also turned into angel investors through family office vehicles. Okay. Now, the former lot, which is the sort of the older, more established families and so on, they tend to invest in businesses which are in some way, shape or form aligned with their core business operations. So the idea is not perfectly a venture builder idea, but to really incubate and help grow ventures, which will ultimately also benefit from the mothership, as it were. Okay. So if I'm manufacturing tires, I'll, try and promote some environmentally friendly tire technology and the like. Okay, and a great example of that actually is Hero MotoCorp, the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturer now. They have put in electric two-wheeler manufacturer Ather Energy, and so they're doing their own electric tech, promoting an Ather and investing in them, almost to disrupt their own business, right? So these examples are started to come, but that's from the older lot. The new age entrepreneurs are investing as more classic angel or pre-Series A investors, where if they like an idea, they'll invest in it, right? And most recently, Ritesh Agarwal of Oyo, just a few days ago, has announced a setup of a startup venture fund where he's looking to cut $1 to $5 million checks or $1 to $10 million checks. And it's going to be a horizontal kind of approach like many other VCs take it. So it's a bit of both, but venture builders are few and far between in India at the moment. And I suspect that might change going forward. Paradoxically, a lot of the larger VC firms, the more established guys, including the likes of a Sequoia and Sequoia India and Safe Part, they've actually set up teams with various brands. I mean, Sequoia Surge is the most famous one out of those. But they've set up structures where they're looking to get into startups at an early stage and actually kind of almost help them grow in a quasi-incubation kind of model here. Okay, so they come. So rather than the family offices coming at it, it's actually the VC firms coming at it as well. So like it'll become a spaghetti, and then it'll emerge as something quite tasty over a period of time, I'm sure.
It's thank you for that. We're getting quite a few questions coming through, which are sort of building around this theme. So I'm going to stay with this theme a little bit for a minute. We talked about, and Noor talked about, different types of term sheets depending on the nature of the investors coming in. We've had a question on from LinkedIn through Raphael Lemaitre, who's asking how we see the opportunity for big corporations as well as state-owned corporations to establish CVCs, corporate venture capital businesses. I think it's feasible and will be the best way forward. So I'm expecting that in the same way that families and different types of term sheets, we may also see that in the difference between CVCs and traditional VCs. Is that true from what you see, Sunil? Do you see any CVC activity, or do you see the opportunity for it?
Sure, no, good question. Well, I can kind of tackle the state-owned side of things first, having worked at a large sovereign wealth fund for about 5 years and seeing it from I think, and it'll really depend on the mandate and the investment approach at various sovereign wealth funds or even CVCs and other state-owned corporations. But, I think the sovereign wealth funds that have done it the best, and I think this also goes for family offices, particularly if you look at, US and European family offices who are 15 or 20 years ahead in terms of VC than perhaps families or most families in more emerging markets. I think the best approach has been to invest first into funds and as a key, and then start to become more active co-investors. And you've seen that develop in the US, where now you've got family offices that have been LPs in all of the big funds globally, and then now starting to take make direct investments into various co-invest opportunities that come off the main portfolio. So I think as a general rule, that's probably the best approach. And family offices, I think CVCs oftentimes will have a different will have different expectations in terms of the investments they make. They'll usually make investments that are tangential or will synergize with portfolio companies, and so they're not necessarily looking at it from a return standpoint, or which can have implications on what the founder is trying to build, because then you're trying to kind of build for that CVC. So there's different strategies around when to take corporate VC money, which can be a great thing depending on the opportunity. But I think it'll vary. But I think Noor hit it right on the head. They're looking for different things, and so what they'll expect in terms of term will be much different than a pure venture capital investor, and that goes for family offices and sovereign wealth funds as well.
And I guess the thing that out perhaps a difference between investing in people and investing in a product will be true for a corporate venture capital business as well. where you're probably looking, as you say, Sunil, at something which is more vertically integrated with the core product set.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Steve,
yeah, please.
Yeah, if I may, this topic, and I think what we have seen, a lot of the kind of the corporate, they look at this challenge as the inventor dilemma. They see their business, their traditional brick and mortar business being disrupted. They want to get into this asset class, right? I think where they don't appreciate is, especially at the early stage, there is a lot of differences between how corporate problem versus how a startup or how a founder think about problem, and like simple stuff like the kind of the speed to make the decision, right, or kind of the governance and all of those things might kill a site where in their mind they're trying to do the right things from corporate culture perspective. So in general, what I like to advise corporate, and what I like to advise even big, large family offices is similar to what Sunil, you invest in funds, observe companies, and once they are more resilient and more of kind of growth stage companies, it is a lot more aligned with how you think about opportunities to come in at that stage for the growth stage. I would caveat that with one thing: if you are looking at heavy R&D tech companies, then probably CVCs are probably in a better position to help those. So for example, if I take the oil and gas industry and we are looking at a company that's developing, I don't know, a new coring mechanism that will increase the efficiency of coring for oil reservoirs by X percentage. Like, I don't think any of the current VCs will be equipped to help those companies with those type of and I think that's where the corporate, they get it slightly wrong. When a product focuses on R&D, probably is better suited with them than with a VC. However, I will pick a VC all day long on the let's say the non-R&D kind of type of businesses until they become to kind of growth stage, and probably a CVC would come in is a much better setup for everyone.
So perhaps later stage investments from the CVCs and things which are more directly integrated with the business, as we were saying before. Yeah. Perhaps I can take a situational perspective on this at the moment. We've had a couple of questions coming through in terms of what we see about the impact of COVID and the current market environment on it. One particular one asking whether we see the pandemic creating greater investment opportunities for local MENA region, or whether we're expecting that to return to pre-COVID levels. My note is that I think we see a range of people that recognize that we shouldn't waste a good crisis and are really looking at market niches that have occurred, or, as I said before, opportunities to accelerate market opportunity that may previously have taken a little longer to bring to market. Noor, perhaps from your perspective, is this something that you see? Are we expecting a bloom that comes as a result of COVID and will return to pre-COVID once and if we get to a post-COVID world?
I don't think so. I don't think we'll return to pre-COVID levels. I think there's been several shifts. There's, first of all, the shift on the large family business, family office side, which has gone from, tech, do we invest in tech? Is this really something that's going to be around for a very long time? To a post-COVID in the future. Our historical businesses are great, but they can be disrupted at any moment, and we need to be invested into internally or externally. So that has driven capital and a mindset change. On the other hand, you've had that have really leaned into the crisis. As you said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So what are the verticals we've discussed? But you couple that with the opportunity cost. So given the reduced employment levels around the world and in our region specifically, the opportunity cost of starting a company has changed people. Before you would have to leave a nice job. Now, as you don't have that job anyway, you might as well go start a company that you believe in that might change, and that could do very well in certain verticals with all this tailwind from the crisis. So we've seen a lot of very kind of advanced in their careers, suddenly start companies. So that's also different. And I think the final thing is that the region is very well poised to leapfrog the region Middle East as well as the region Africa. So when M-Pesa was built, that wasn't someone thinking outside the box. That was someone coming in and saying there is no box, right? So it was literally from scratch. We're not looking to replace the banks. There are no banks. We're not looking to replace financial system. People are not going from banks to digital banking or mobile banking. They're going from cash to mobile banking. So similarly, some nation like healthcare right now, it's not going from, rather than go see my physician, I'll use telemedicine. It's, I have no physician, and now suddenly I have a teledoctor. I have no school or proper education system, and suddenly I have access to online learning. So this leapfrogging of historical infrastructure and legacy is where the region can be incredibly strong and where people are leaning in. And I think that's a massive opportunity. And I think as a result, you couple the capital that suddenly has said, this is actually somewhere we need a regulator, which suddenly wants digital health and wants remote learning, which 6 months ago would have said no to both, right? And the entrepreneurs diving right into it and saying, how can we build this from scratch, given that we have no legacy infrastructure and the regulators on our side and the capital? You're in a position where you could have a massive boom in several verticals and across the ecosystem at large. And as a result, you'll end up with a permanent change in mindsets and infrastructure, not temporary.
Yeah, no, I think, and I fully agree with you. The opportunity to set up things like a Department of Health Tech Accelerator GM probably wouldn't have existed a year ago. And now it's something that the health regulator has embraced and driven forward. Some of the investments that we see coming from the public money around things like the Gadan 20 support, innovation and growth, maybe would have been there, but have become far more important and far more the political agenda than they would have been before. So I think that we're not going back is the message that I get from that, and I would fully agree with it. We've got just a few more minutes left until we get to our closing time. There's one question that I want to bring back, which came up a lot earlier on, and it kind of brings us full started. And I'm struggling to see in the questions where it is, so I apologise to the person that asked. Oh no, I've got it here from LinkedIn. Well, it said, what's the advantage of becoming a MEVCA member? Can an individual become a member, or is it limited to a VC or registered investment firm? You probably covered some of this to start with, but you're all very active in MEVCA. An opportunity.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for the question. So there we have. I'll answer the second one first, actually. Different categories. So there's investors, VCs, depending on AUM, ultimately, not yet, but that's where the world tends to put these associations. And there is space for individuals and for founders, because again, it's about connecting and creating the ecosystem and empowering everybody together and practices. The advantages you will see on the website, if you go to the event side, we have lots of events. So the last one we had pre-COVID in person was in December with Tim Draper, who was here, and we did almost like a closed room event, about 40 people. We've had a lot of closed door VC events as well as then ecosystem events with founders, newsletter, and then ultimately you get to meet other VCs. And now there's this mentorship platform that we're launching this week. So then as a member, you'll have access to the mentorship platform, so you can get mentorship from VCs. VCs have donated 20, 50, or 100 hours. ADGM has donated. So let's say you're a fintech founder and you want access to mentorship from ADGM, the best and fastest way is probably to get onto the platform, ask your questions, and really engage with them on a mentorship level. And that can be a one-off or a series, depending on what the VC firms have chosen and the ecosystem has chosen. We're onboarding soon Silicon Valley Bank. We're onboarding soon Microsoft, AWS. So it'll be a lot of the ecosystem players as well as the VC. So what we're really hoping is that that's really useful for individuals and founders, and then the VC side of it is very useful for the VCs, and it brings everybody together under one umbrella. So thank you, Steve, for the opportunity to market.
Couldn't say it better than you've just said it. So fantastic. I'm going to give everybody a quick opportunity for closing remark. just a brief one, if you will. We've got a lot of questions that have come through on the platform today. This has been one of the most lively sessions that I've seen in terms of from our audience, and I apologise to anybody whose questions we haven't been able to get to through here. They will be available to our panelists, and so hopefully they'll take a look at those and come back to any that are really important thereafter. Jaideep, your closing remarks, if I could.
Sure. Just picking up from points my co-panelists made, I think in India, investors have voted with their feet. In H1 2019, there were 283 early stage deals in India. In H1 2020, there were 305. So whether you're an entrepreneur looking to raise early stage money, or you're an investor looking for the best investment opportunity, the ecosystem over here suggests that people see the current setback as temporary, and that economically and socially will adjust to the reality of COVID and move on from there. I personally also believe, by the way, that there is no such thing as a post-COVID world. I think we just need to understand this is it. What we are living through is going to be there for the foreseeable future. And, irrespective of vaccines and so on, we'll need to make some of these changes permanent. And, especially Noor has made some great points there. The other thing which I'd like to just say is that, I'm seeing a lot of lag in new fund launches, right? Across not just India, but also other parts of the world, including the Middle East and Africa region. And that is a little bit worrying. It points to a bottleneck of funding maybe 2 or 3 years down the line once the current lot of funds get invested and the next round of. So I hope that sort of auto-corrects itself and the LPs become as enthusiastic about investing as the early stage investors are at the moment here. So I think, and then I'll sign off by saying that, to all of you folks and to those listening in, if anyone would like to get in touch and anyone needs any help with respect to the Indian ecosystem or to have a friendly chit chat, I'm available on most social platforms and especially on LinkedIn. I'm very active. So please do reach out. And it's been a pleasure being on this absolutely fantastic panel.
Thank you, JP. Mahmood, a 30-second comment from you.
We'll keep it very quick and sweet. First of all, thank you for hosting us. Second, I look at our job as enabling the dreamers from our region to achieve their dreams. That's what we do as VCs. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sunil, coming to you.
Sure. No, thank you, EDGM, for hosting all of us. I think it's been super insightful, even being a panelist on these. I love these in terms of catching up and seeing what's going on in the rest of the world. I think against the backdrop of all this doom and gloom and COVID and what's ahead of us in terms of that over the next 6 to 12 months, I think echoing what Noor said earlier, I to be part of those journeys. So thank you everyone.
Excellent. And being married for more than 30 years has taught me always to give the lady the last word.
Well, I think that the industries that we're excited about and are being disrupted are ones that are way overdue. Healthcare, education, these are things that create a huge impact in the world, and building the right companies right now can really be an opportunity to do well and do good for many generations to come. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Steve.
And thank you to all of my panelists today. On behalf of ADGM, I'd like to thank those of you that have listened in as well, and for all of you that have asked questions. Close and look forward to seeing you on our next webcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.